Nicholas Grayson had everything: wealth, power, a name that controlled half of Manhattan. But when a dying woman with honey-colored eyes made him question everything, he had to choose his empire or his heart. What would you risk for love? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Nicholas Grayson stood at the window of his penthouse office, looking down at the city lights of Manhattan. His fingers traced the cold glass as he watched tiny cars move like ants 50 stories below. Everything he saw belonged to him in one way or another. The Grayson name was on half the buildings downtown, but tonight, none of it meant anything. Mr. Grayson? His assistant Martha knocked on the door. The board meeting ended an hour ago. Everyone's waiting for your decision about the hospital acquisition. Nicholas didn't turn around. Tell them I need more time. But sir, the offer expires at midnight. If we don't buy St. Mary's Hospital now, Davidson Corp will tear it down and build luxury condos. I said I need more time. His voice echoed through the empty office. Martha jumped, then quietly closed the door. Nicholas walked to his desk and picked up the framed photo of his parents. Their smiling faces stared back at him, frozen in time 10 years ago, before the plane crash that left him alone with an empire. To run. What would you do? He whispered to the photo. All this money and I can't even remember the last time I felt anything. His phone buzzed. Another message from Sandra, his girlfriend, or ex-girlfriend now. Her words from their fight this morning still rang in his ears. You think throwing money at everything fixes it? You're just a checkbook with legs, Nicholas. You don't know how to love anything except your bank account. He dropped into his leather chair and loosened his tie. Sandra was the fourth woman to break up with him this year. Each one claimed he was cold, distant, unable to connect. Maybe they were right. The intercom buzzed again. Mr. Grayson. Martha's voice was hesitant. Your sister Caroline is on line 1. She says it's about your mother's foundation. Nicholas sighed and picked up the phone. What is it, Caroline? Nice to hear from you too, big brother. His sister's voice dripped with sarcasm. Have you forgotten about Mom's charity work? The annual hospital visits? I've been busy. You're always busy. But Mom made us promise we'd keep helping people. The foundation's supposed to visit St. Mary's Hospital tomorrow. They're expecting us. Send someone else. No, Nicholas, Mom always said charity isn't about writing checks, it's about showing up, being there. Remember? Nicholas rubbed his temples. Fine, I'll stop by for 15 minutes. And wear something normal. Last time, you showed up in a $3,000 suit. You made everyone uncomfortable. The line went dead before he could argue. Nicholas looked down at his Italian shoes that cost more than most people's monthly salary. When was the last time he'd worn anything that wasn't designer? His eyes fell on the hospital acquisition papers. St. Mary's was a small, struggling facility in the poorer part of town. Buying it would be pocket change for him, but something made him hesitate. Martha, he called out. His assistant appeared instantly. Cancel my meetings tomorrow, and could you find me some regular clothes, something ordinary people would wear? Martha's eyebrows shot up, but she nodded. Of course, sir. Any particular reason? Nicholas turned back to the window. The city lights blurred together, making him feel dizzy and lost in his own tower. I need to remember something, he said quietly. Something important. That night, Nicholas barely slept. He tossed and turned in his silk sheets, haunted by memories of his mother reading stories to sick children, of his father talking to elderly patients like they were old friends. The Graysons had always been rich, but his parents never let money define them. When had he forgotten that? Morning came too soon. Nicholas stared at the plain black t-shirt and jeans Martha had bought. They felt foreign against his skin. No designer labels, no gold cufflinks, just cotton and denim, like millions of other people wore every day. Your car is ready, sir, Martha said when he emerged from his office. No. Nicholas surprised himself with the word. I'll take the subway. Martha's jaw dropped. The subway? But sir, and Martha? He managed a small smile. Stop calling me sir. For today I'm just Nicholas. The elevator ride down felt longer than usual. Each floor that passed stripped away another layer of his usual armor. By the time he reached The lobby, Nicholas Grayson, billionaire CEO, had vanished. In his place stood just a man, uncertain, uncomfortable, but somehow feeling more real than he had in years. He stepped out into the morning sun, another face in the crowd. Nobody stared, nobody whispered, nobody knew who he was. For the first time in a decade, Nicholas Grayson was invisible, and strangely, it felt like taking his first real breath since his parents died. The subway ride to St. Mary's Hospital would change everything, though Nicholas didn't know it yet. He was about to meet someone who would make him question everything he thought he knew about wealth, love, and what really matters in life. But for now, he just held on to the subway pole, swaying with the motion of the train, watching the tunnel. Lights flash by like memories of a simpler time. His mother's voice echoed in his mind. Remember, Nicholas, the richest person isn't the one with the most money. It's the one with the most love to give. He hadn't understood then. He was about to learn St. Mary's Hospital wasn't what Nicholas expected. Instead of the rundown building he'd imagined, he found something different. A place filled with heart, if not money. The walls needed paint, and the chairs in the waiting room were worn, but everywhere he looked, he saw people helping people. You must be from the Grayson Foundation, a nurse said, hurrying up to him. She didn't recognize him as Nicholas Grayson himself, and somehow that made him stand straighter. I'm Nancy. We've got the children's ward ready for your visit. Nicholas followed her through corridors that smelled of disinfectant and coffee. His designer shoes, the one piece of his usual outfit he hadn't been able to give up, squeaked on the linoleum floor. Most of our volunteers start in the children's ward, Nancy chatted as they walked. But we've got a special case I'd like you to see first. She's been asking for someone to read to her. They stopped outside room 314. Through the window, Nicholas saw a young woman sitting up in bed, her dark hair falling in waves around her shoulders. She was thin, too thin, but something about her made him pause. Maybe it was the way she smiled at the birds outside her window, or how her hands moved gracefully as she arranged a small vase of wildflowers on her bedside table. That's Lily Carter, Nancy said softly. 26 years old, stage 4 cancer. She's been here 3 months, but you'd never know she was sick from her attitude. She keeps our spirits up more than we do hers. Nicholas felt something twist in his chest. No family? None that visit. But she's got more love in her heart than anyone I've ever met. Nancy checked her watch. I've got to run. Just be yourself with her. She has a way of seeing right through fake people. Before Nicholas could protest, Nancy was gone. He stood there, frozen, suddenly aware that he didn't know how to be himself. He'd played the role of Nicholas Grayson, billionaire CEO, for so long that he'd forgotten who he was without all the money and power. Taking a deep breath, he knocked on the door. Come in. Her voice was surprisingly strong. Nicholas stepped into the room and Lily Carter turned to look at him. Her eyes were the color of honey in sunlight, and they crinkled at the corners when she smiled. Are you my reader for today? She asked. Nicholas nodded, not trusting his voice. Thank goodness, I've been stuck on the same page of Pride and Prejudice for 3 days. She patted the chair next to her bed. I'm Lily. Nicholas, he said, then quickly added, just Nicholas. Well, just Nicholas, she teased. How do you feel about Mr. Darcy? He sat down, careful not to wrinkle his jeans the way he usually worried about his suits. I've never read it. Lily's eyes widened in mock horror. Never? Oh, we have to fix that right now. She handed him the worn paperback. Start from the beginning and do the voices. The voices? You know, different voices for different characters. My dad used to do that when he read to me. Her smile dimmed slightly. Before he died. Nicholas opened the book, his fingers trembling slightly. He hadn't read aloud since grade school, but something about Lily's expectant face made him want to try. It is a truth universally acknowledged, he began, his voice uncertain, that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. Lily closed her eyes, smiling. Perfect. Keep going. And so Nicholas read. He stumbled over words, mixed up characters, and his attempts at an English accent were terrible. But Lily didn't seem to mind. She listened with her eyes closed. occasionally laughing at his mistakes or sighing at romantic parts. An hour passed, then 2. The afternoon sun moved across the room, painting everything in gold. Nicholas's throat was getting dry, but he didn't want to stop. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about business deals or board meetings. He was just here, present, real. A nurse came in with Lily's medication, and Nicholas realized he'd missed 3 meetings. Somehow he couldn't bring himself to care. "Same time tomorrow?" Lily asked as he stood to leave. Yes, he found himself saying. "Same time tomorrow." Walking back to the subway station, Nicholas pulled out his phone to check his messages. 47 missed calls, 32 urgent emails, 5 angry texts from his sister, asking why he'd skipped the Foundation's official visit. But all he could think about was Lily's smile when he'd agreed to come back. That night, in his penthouse apartment, Nicholas did something he hadn't done in years. He went out onto his balcony and looked up at the stars. The same stars Lily could see from her hospital window. His phone rang. It was Martha. "Sir, the board is demanding an answer about St. Mary's Hospital. Davidson Corp is threatening to raise their bid." Nicholas thought about the worn linoleum floors, the outdated equipment, the faded paint on the walls. He thought about Nancy the nurse, who cared more about her patients than protocol. He thought about room 314, where a young woman with honey-colored eyes found joy in classic novels and summer breezes. "Tell them I'll buy it," he said. "The whole hospital? But sir, the cost analysis—" "I don't care about the cost." Nicholas watched a shooting star streak across the sky. "Just make it happen. And Martha, I need you to do something else for me." "Of course, sir. Find out everything you can about rose gardens. I want to build one outside room 314. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Martha said quietly, "Does this have something to do with where you were today?" Nicholas thought about Lily's face when she talked about her father reading to her, about how she made him forget he was Nicholas Grayson, billionaire, and let him just be Nicholas, the man who couldn't do a proper English accent. "No," he said softly. "It has to do with remembering who I am." That night, Nicholas dreamed of rose gardens and honey-colored eyes. And for the first time since his parents died, he didn't feel alone in his golden tower. But tomorrow would bring complications he couldn't imagine. Because while Nicholas was rediscovering his heart, others were plotting to take everything he had. And soon he would have to choose between the empire he'd built and the love he never knew he needed. He went where? Victor Davidson slammed his fist on the mahogany conference table. His son James, fresh out of business school, flinched at his father's anger. "St. Mary's Hospital," James repeated. "Our sources say Nicholas Grayson has been going there every day for the past week. Not for business. He's been reading to patients." Victor's face turned red. "Reading to patients, while I'm trying to take over his company. There's more." James slid a folder across the table. "He bought the hospital last night. Paid 3 times what it's worth." Victor picked up the folder and smiled, the kind of smile that made his employees run for cover. Well, it seems the ice-cold Nicholas Grayson has finally found his heart. How convenient." "What do you mean?" "It means, son, that we finally know his weakness." Victor picked up his phone. "Get me Sandra Collins on the line." Across town, in his office, Nicholas was trying to concentrate on work, but his mind kept drifting. To room 314, to Lily's laugh when he attempted a French accent for a character in their new book, to the way her face lit up every time he walked through the door. "Sir?" Martha's voice came through the intercom. "Your sister Caroline is here." Before Nicholas could respond, Caroline burst into the office, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor. "What's going on with you, Nick?" "Hello to you too, sis. Don't play cute. You buy a failing hospital without consulting anyone. You disappear for hours every day. The board is in panic mode and Davidson Corp is breathing down our necks." She crossed her arms. "Talk to me." Nicholas stood and walked to the window. The rose garden construction had started that morning. He could see the workers from here. "Do you remember how Mom and Dad used to take us to hospitals?" he asked quietly. "Of course I do, but what does that—" "I forgot, Caroline. I forgot what it felt like to help people. To be more than just a signature on a check." Caroline's expression softened. "This is about that patient, isn't it? The one Nancy told me about." Nicholas turned sharply. You spoke to Nancy? I'm still. On the foundation board, remember? The nurses talk about you, about how you spend hours reading to some girl named Lily. She touched his arm gently. Nick, is this really about Charity? Or are you falling for her? Before Nicholas could answer, Martha rushed in, her face pale. Sir, you need to see this. She turned on the office TV. Sandra, his ex-girlfriend, was on the morning news, makeup perfect, eyes filled with practiced tears. I tried to help Nicholas, she was saying. He's been so lost since his parents died. That's why he's been acting erratically, buying failing hospitals, spending time with terminal patients. He's having a breakdown, and as someone who cares about him, I had to speak up. Nicholas felt the blood drain from his face. Caroline gripped his arm. There's more, Martha said quietly. The scene changed to Victor Davidson, looking appropriately concerned. As a fellow businessman and old friend of the Grayson family, I feel obligated to step in. I'm calling for an emergency board meeting to discuss Nicholas's fitness to lead Grayson Enterprises. The TV clicked off. The silence in the office was deafening. They're trying to take the company, Caroline whispered. They're using your visits to Lily to do it. Nicholas sat heavily in his chair. All his life, he'd protected himself with walls of money and power. Now, the one time he'd let those walls down, his enemies were using it against him. What are you going to do? Caroline asked. Nicholas thought of Lily, waiting in room 314 with their book. She'd been teaching him about courage. Not the kind that bought companies or made millions, but the kind that opened your heart even when it might get broken. Martha, he said, his voice steady. Call my lawyers, then call the hospital. I need to talk to Lily. Nick, wait. Caroline grabbed his arm. You need to handle this situation first. The company can wait. Nicholas pulled away. I need to tell her the truth before she hears it from someone else. But he was too late. In her hospital room, Lily was already watching the news. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she learned that her just Nicholas was really Nicholas Grayson, billionaire CEO, the man whose company made the expensive cancer drugs she couldn't afford. Nancy stood in the doorway watching helplessly as Lily's heart broke. He lied to me, Lily whispered, touching the rose he'd brought her yesterday. Everything was a lie. Not everything, Nancy tried to say, but Lily turned to the window. When he comes today, she said quietly, tell him I'm sleeping. Tell him not to come back. As Nicholas rode the elevator down to his car, his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was a photo, Lily in her hospital bed watching the news about him, tears on her face. The message read, back off from St. Mary's, or everyone learns how you manipulated a dying girl's feelings for publicity. Your choice, Grayson, the company, or her reputation. For the first time in his adult life, Nicholas Grayson didn't know what to do. The empire he'd built, the legacy he'd protected, all of it was at risk. And now, so was the one person who'd made him feel truly alive again. In his pocket, he touched the small velvet box he'd been carrying for 2 days. Inside was a simple silver necklace with a rose pendant. Not expensive, not flashy, just beautiful, like Lily. Now he wondered if she'd ever let him give it to her. The elevator doors opened to a crowd of reporters, their cameras flashing like strobe lights. Above the chaos, Nicholas heard his sister calling his name. The board meeting would start in an hour. He had to choose, the company or Lily, money or love, the life he'd built or the life he wanted to build. And somewhere in St. Mary's hospital in room 314, Lily Carter wiped her tears and began to write him a letter. Because sometimes the greatest love stories start with a broken heart. The boardroom of Grayson Enterprises felt colder than usual. Nicholas sat at the head of the table, his father's old chair feeling too big for the first time since he'd inherited it. 14 pairs of eyes stared at him, waiting. Victor Davidson stood at the other end, perfectly groomed and smiling like a shark. As you can all see from the reports, Nicholas's recent behavior raises serious concerns, buying a failing hospital at 3 times its value, neglecting key meetings. And now, these disturbing rumors about emotional manipulation of a terminal patient, that's enough. Nicholas's voice cut through the room like steel. "You don't get to talk about her." "The board needs to protect this company," Victor continued smoothly. "I move for an immediate vote of no confidence." Caroline, sitting to Nicholas's right, squeezed his hand under the table, but before anyone could speak, the door burst open. Martha rushed in, out of breath. "Sir," she gasped, "the hospital. You need to come now." Nicholas was on his feet instantly. "What happened?" "It's Lily. She had a bad reaction to her new medication. They're moving her to intensive care." The boardroom erupted in murmurs. Victor's smile widened. "You see? Even now, he puts this girl before the company. I call for an immediate vote." "Wait." Nicholas's voice was quiet, but firm. Everyone fell silent. He looked around the table at the faces he'd known for years. Some were concerned, some calculating, some confused. He thought of his father, who built this company from nothing, of his mother, who always said success meant nothing without kindness. "You want to vote? Fine. But first, let me tell you a story." He sat down, his hands steady. 10 years ago, my parents died in a plane crash. Everyone told me I handled it so well. I stepped up, took control, doubled our profits. What they didn't know was that I died that day too. I just didn't realize. It until I met Lily. The room was absolutely silent now. She taught me something that all our money can't buy. She taught me how to live again, to care, to love. He looked directly at Victor. "You think that makes me weak? It makes me stronger than I've ever been." He stood, straightening his tie. "So yes, I bought that hospital, and I'd do it again, because my parents built this company to help people, not just make money. If you've forgotten that, maybe you should vote me out." Nicholas walked to the door, then turned back. "The vote can wait until tomorrow. Right now, someone I love needs me, and for the first time in 10 years, I know exactly what matters most." He left them sitting there, shocked into silence. Caroline hurried after him. "Nick, wait, what are you doing? What Dad would have done." He loosened his tie as they reached the elevator. "Call George at the FDA. Tell him to fast-track the approval of that new cancer drug we've been developing. But it's still in trials. It's passed every safety test. The only reason we were waiting was to time the market release for maximum profit." The elevator doors opened. "Not anymore. And Caroline? Call a press conference. It's time everyone knew the truth." At St. Mary's Hospital, the ICU was quiet except for the steady beep of monitors. Lily lay pale against white sheets, her dark hair a stark contrast. Nancy sat beside her, holding her hand. "He's not coming," Lily whispered. "He has his board meeting. Don't be so sure about that." Nancy nodded toward the door. Nicholas stood there, still in his suit, looking more human than he had in years. His eyes were red, his tie crooked. "Get out," Lily said weakly, turning away. "No." Nicholas walked to her bed. "I'm done running away. From you, from my feelings, from who I really am. You lied to me." "Yes, because I was afraid." He sat in the chair Nancy quietly vacated. "For 10 years, everyone wanted something from me, my money, my power, my name. But you just wanted me to do silly voices while reading Jane Austen." Despite herself, Lily's lips twitched. "You saw me, Lily. The real me, not Nicholas Grayson, CEO, just Nicholas. And I fell in love with you." Lily finally looked at him, tears in her eyes. "I'm dying, Nicholas. I know." He took her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. That's why every moment matters more. He pulled out the velvet box and opened it. The silver rose pendant caught the hospital lights. "I bought this at a small jewelry store yesterday, the kind I haven't been in since I was a kid. It probably cost less than my tie pin, but it made me think of you." "It's beautiful," Lily whispered. "You make me want to be beautiful too, inside where it counts." He clasped the necklace around her neck. "I'm about to lose my company. Victor Davidson and his allies will probably win tomorrow's vote. I'll still be rich, but the empire I built will be gone." "I'm so sorry," Nicholas smiled. "Don't be. Because I finally understand what real wealth is. It's not in my bank account, it's right here in this room." Suddenly, alarms started beeping. Lily's eyes fluttered. "Nicholas," she whispered, "I need to tell you something." But before she could finish, her eyes closed and doctors rushed in, pushing Nicholas aside. Her heart rates dropping, Get a crash cart. Nicholas stood helplessly in the corner, watching the medical team work. His phone buzzed. Messages about the board meeting, about Davidson's plans, about his empire crumbling. He ignored them all, his eyes fixed on Lily's face. In that moment, he made a decision that would change everything. A decision that would shake the foundations of Grayson Enterprises, challenge the medical industry, and either save or destroy everything he'd ever built. Because sometimes, love isn't just about grand gestures or simple choices. Sometimes love means changing the whole world just to save one heart. And Nicholas Grayson was about to do exactly that, if only Lily would wake up to see it. The next 24 hours at St. Mary's Hospital were a blur of activity. Doctors came and went from Lily's room, speaking in hushed medical terms. Nicholas hadn't left his chair by her bed, his suit wrinkled, his phone buzzing endlessly with ignored messages. "Mr. Grayson." Dr. Sarah Chen, Lily's oncologist, touched his shoulder. "We need to talk." Nicholas followed her to the hallway, his legs stiff from sitting so long. Through the window, he could see the half-finished rose garden, workers still, placing stones for the pathways. "The experimental drug you mentioned," Dr. Chen said quietly, "the one your company's been developing. How close is it to approval?" "We've passed all safety trials. It's just waiting for final FDA clearance." Nicholas ran a hand through his messy hair. "Why?" "Because nothing else is working." Dr. Chen showed him Lily's chart. "The cancer is spreading faster than we expected. Without something new—" She didn't finish the sentence. Nicholas's phone buzzed again. Martha's text read, "Board vote in 2 hours. Davidson has the votes. We're going to lose." He looked back through the window at Lily's sleeping form. The silver rose pendant still glinted at her throat. "Martha," he said into his phone, "remember that press conference we planned? Move it up. Now, and get me George from the FDA on the line." Inside the room, Lily stirred. Nancy, who'd stayed past her shift to help, wiped Lily's forehead with a cool cloth. "Nicholas?" Lily's voice was barely a whisper. He was by her side instantly. "I'm here. I heard the doctors. I know it's bad." Her honey-colored eyes found his. "For you should go to your board meeting, save your company. The company doesn't matter. It was your parents' dream." Nicholas took her hand, feeling how fragile it had become. They had a bigger dream than just making money. They wanted to help people. He kissed her palm. "I'm about to do something crazy, Lily. The kind of thing that either saves everything or loses everything." "Tell me." Before he could answer, Caroline burst into the room. "Nick, what are you doing? The press is gathering downstairs. Davidson's people are there too." "Perfect." Nicholas stood, straightening his wrinkled jacket. "They wanted a show, let's give them one." "At least change your suit," Caroline pleaded. "No," Nicholas smiled. "I want everyone to see exactly what I've been doing instead of attending their precious board meeting." He turned back to Lily. "Watch the TV and remember, everything I'm about to do, I do for love." In the hospital lobby, reporters jostled for position. Cameras flashed as Nicholas walked to the podium, looking nothing like the polished CEO they were used to seeing. His suit was wrinkled, his tie long gone, his hair messy from running. His hands through it. Victor Davidson stood at the back, smirking. "This should be good." Nicholas looked straight into the cameras. 10 years ago, my parents died in a plane crash. Everyone praised me for how well I handled it, how I threw myself into running the company. The truth is, I stopped living that day. I became what everyone expected. Cold, calculating, focused only on profit. The reporters leaned forward, sensing a story bigger than they'd expected. 2 weeks ago, I met someone who taught me what my parents always knew, that a life without love is no life at all. That woman is upstairs right now, fighting for her life. Fighting a cancer that my company, he looked directly at Victor, has the power to help treat. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Grayson Enterprises has developed a new cancer drug. It's passed every safety trial. The only reason we haven't released it is that we were waiting for the perfect market conditions to maximize profit. His voice hardened. That ends today. Victor pushed forward. You can't do this. Actually, I can. 1 hour ago, I signed an executive order as CEO. Our new drug will be released immediately at production cost. No markup, no profit. Nicholas smiled as Victor's face turned purple. Oh, and I'm donating controlling interest in Grayson Enterprises to the Maria Grayson Foundation, named after my mother. They'll ensure this company remembers its true purpose. The lobby erupted in chaos. Reporters shouted questions. Victor Davidson stormed out, already on his phone to his lawyers. Caroline stood in the back, tears streaming down her face as she finally recognized the brother she'd thought she'd lost. But Nicholas wasn't done. To the board members meeting to vote me out, go ahead, fire me. But know this, everything I've done, every erratic decision you questioned, has led to the highest public approval ratings this company has ever seen. Check your phones, check social media, the world is watching. He stepped away from the podium, ignoring the shouted questions. In the elevator riding back to Lily's floor, he finally looked at his phone. The hashtag #GraysonLove was trending worldwide. His email was flooded with messages from shareholders, many retracting their support for Davidson's vote, but none of that mattered as much as the text from Nancy. She's awake. She saw everything. Hurry! The elevator seemed to move in slow motion. Nicholas's heart pounded. He'd just risked everything. His company, his reputation, his entire empire. Was it enough? Would the drug work in time? And most importantly, would Lily understand what he'd just declared to the world? As the elevator doors opened to the ICU floor, Nicholas heard a sound that made his heart stop. Code blue alarms were ringing, and they were coming from room 314. Clear! The doctor pressed the defibrillator paddles to Lily's chest. Her body arched off the bed, then fell still. The heart monitor continued its awful, steady tone. Nicholas stood frozen in the doorway. Time seemed to stop. All his money, all his power, all his grand gestures, none of it mattered if he lost her. Again, Dr. Chen called out. Clear! Another shock. Nothing. Come on, Lily, Nicholas whispered. Fight! Dr. Chen raised the paddles one more time. Clear! Suddenly, a beep. Then another. Weak, but there, we've got a pulse, a nurse called out. It's stabilizing. Nicholas's legs gave out. He sank into a chair, his whole body shaking. Caroline, who had followed him up, gripped his shoulder. She's a fighter, she whispered. Dr. Chen approached them, wiping her forehead. We've stabilized her for now, but she needs that new drug, Nicholas. How fast can you make it happen? Nicholas was already on his phone. Martha, execute emergency protocol 7. Yes, now, and get the helicopter ready. Within an hour, the hospital. Roof became a landing pad. The helicopter's blades cut through the evening air as it touched down, carrying precious cargo, the first doses of Grayson Enterprises' new cancer drug. In his office across town, Victor Davidson watched the news. Coverage with growing rage, his phone rang. What do you mean you're withdrawing the no confidence vote? He shouted. We had the board locked down. The voice on the other end was apologetic but firm. Have you seen the stock price, Victor? It's soaring. The public loves the story. The ruthless CEO who found his heart, giving away a fortune to save lives. We'd be crucified if we tried to stop him now. Victor slammed the phone down. Decades of planning, all ruined because Nicholas Grayson had fallen in love with a dying girl. Back at St. Mary's, Dr. Chen personally administered the first dose of the new drug. Nicholas sat beside Lily's bed, holding her hand, willing his strength into her. Hours passed. The moon rose over the half-finished rose garden. Caroline brought coffee. Martha handled the flood of press requests. And slowly, very slowly, Lily's color began to improve. At midnight, her eyes fluttered open. You're still here, she whispered. Nicholas smiled through his tears. Always will be. I saw. She swallowed hard. I saw what you did. On TV, you gave up everything? No. He touched the rose pendant at her throat. I found everything. Lily's eyes filled with tears. Why? Why would you risk so much for me? Because you taught me what real wealth is. He brushed her hair back from her face. It's not in bank accounts or boardrooms, it's in the way you smile when I do terrible British accents. It's in how you see beauty in simple things, like wildflowers and morning sunlight. It's in your heart, Lily, the most precious thing I've ever found. A soft knock interrupted them. Nancy stood in the doorway, smiling. Sorry, but there's someone here who insists on seeing you, Nicholas. An elderly man in an expensive suit walked in. Nicholas recognized him instantly. Judge Harrison? The judge nodded. Quite a show you put on today, son. Reminded me of your father. You knew my father? I was there when he started this company. He made me promise to watch over it. And you? Judge Harrison sat down heavily. That's why I'm here. The board just voted. Nicholas tensed. Lily squeezed his hand. Unanimously, Judge Harrison continued, to reject the no confidence motion. Furthermore, they've approved all your recent decisions, the drug release, the foundation, everything. But how? Because you proved something today. You proved you're your father's son. The judge smiled. He always said the best business decisions come from the heart. Lily's monitors showed her heart rate strengthening. Dr. Chen came in to check her vitals, her face breaking into a smile. The drug seems to be working, she said. Her numbers are improving. Nicholas felt hope rise in his chest, but then he saw Lily's expression. What's wrong? What about the other patients? She asked quietly. The ones who can't afford even the production. A cost? Nicholas looked at her, really looked at her. Even now, weak and tired, she was thinking of others. He turned to Judge Harrison. I need one more vote from the board. What now? I want to create a fund for patients who can't afford treatment. We'll call it the Lily Carter Foundation. Lily gasped. Nicholas, no. Yes. He kissed her hand. Because you taught me that love isn't just about grand gestures. It's about helping others find hope. Like you helped me. Judge Harrison stood, straightening his jacket. I'll call the board. Something tells me this vote won't be a problem either. As the judge left, Caroline poked her head in. Nick, the workers want to know if you still want to finish the rose garden. Nicholas looked at Lily. Even pale and tired, she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Yes, he said, but with one change. I want to add a reading bench under the biggest rose bush. Lily's eyes sparkled. For terrible British accents? For terrible British accents. Outside the window, the first rays of dawn touched the half-finished garden. Like a sign, a single rose had bloomed early, its petals catching the morning light. But inside room 314, an even more precious flower was blooming, the kind that grows between two hearts and changes them forever. Victor Davidson might have lost his chance at taking over Grayson Enterprises, but he wasn't done plotting. And as Nicholas and Lily began to hope for a future together, dark clouds were gathering that would test their love in ways they never imagined. 2 weeks had passed since Lily's near-death experience. The rose garden outside St. Mary's was almost complete, and Lily was growing stronger each day. Nicholas split his time between running his company from a makeshift office in the hospital and reading Jane Austen in terrible accents by Lily's bedside. But in a dark corner of the Davidson building, across town, Victor Davidson was meeting with someone who could destroy everything. Are you sure about this? Victor asked, studying the documents spread across his desk. The woman nodded. Her grey hair was perfectly styled, her expensive suit immaculate. Absolutely. I've kept these papers hidden for 27 years. I never thought I'd need them. And you're willing to testify for the right price. She smiled coldly. After all, a mother should be compensated for revealing such painful secrets. Victor's eyes glittered. Mrs. Carter, I believe we have a deal. Meanwhile, at St. Mary's, Lily was taking her first walk in the new rose garden. Nicholas held her arm, watching her face glow with joy at each blooming flower. It's more beautiful than I imagined, she said, touching a pale pink rose. Though I still think you went overboard with the reading bench. Hey, that bench is essential for proper Jane Austen appreciation. Nicholas helped her sit down. The morning sun warmed their faces. Nicholas? Lily's voice turned serious. There's something I need to tell you. His heart skipped. What is it? Are you feeling worse? No, the drug is working wonderfully. She twisted the rose pendant around her neck. It's about my past, my family. Before she could continue, Caroline came rushing down the garden path. Nick, you need to see this. She thrust a tablet into his hands. On the screen was a breaking news story. Shocking revelations. The true identity of Nicholas Grayson's new love. Nicholas felt Lily stiffen beside him. The article was brutal. It claimed that Lily was actually the illegitimate daughter of Thomas Carter, one of the original investors in Grayson Enterprises, who had died mysteriously just before the company went public. The story suggested she had orchestrated the whole romance to claim her rightful inheritance. "That's ridiculous," Nicholas said, throwing the tablet onto the bench. "Lily, don't even worry about this nonsense." But Lily's face had gone pale. "Nicholas?" "Mr. Grayson." A hospital security guard approached. "There's a Miss Eleanor Carter here to see you. She says she's Miss Lily's mother." Nicholas felt Lily's hand trembling in his. "I've never met my mother," she whispered. "Dad said she abandoned us when I was a baby. The elegant woman who walked into the garden could have stepped out of a society magazine. Her eyes, the same honey color as Lily's, were cold and calculating." "Hello, darling," she said to Lily. "It's time we had a little family reunion." Nicholas stepped protectively in front of Lily. "If you're working with Davidson..." "Oh, I'm working for myself." Eleanor Carter pulled out a manila envelope. "These are DNA test results proving Lily is Thomas Carter's daughter, and these," she pulled out more papers, "are letters proving Thomas was about to expose financial irregularities in Grayson Enterprises before his convenient accident." Lily gripped Nicholas's arm. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying, dear daughter, that Nicholas's father might have been responsible for your father's death." Eleanor's smile was razor-sharp. "Quite a romance you two have here. The son of the man who killed your father, falling in love with the victim's secret daughter." Nicholas felt like he'd been punched. "My father would never..." "Money makes people do terrible things." Eleanor sat gracefully on the reading bench. "Of course I'm willing to keep this all quiet, for the right price." "You're blackmailing us?" Lily's voice shook. "I prefer to think of it as delayed maternal compensation." Eleanor checked her designer watch. "You have 24 hours to transfer $50 million to this account, or tomorrow's headlines will destroy both the Grayson name and your touching love story." She stood, brushing invisible dust from her suit. "Oh, and Lily? You have your father's eyes. Pity he never got to see you grow up." After she left, the garden seemed colder despite the morning sun. Lily's legs gave out, and Nicholas caught her before she fell. "I'm so sorry," she whispered against his chest. "I knew my father had worked for Grayson Enterprises, but I never knew. I should have told." Hey." Nicholas tilted her face up to his. "None of this is your fault." "But what if she's telling the truth? About our fathers?" Nicholas helped her back to the bench, his mind racing. Something about this whole situation felt wrong. Eleanor's timing was too perfect. Her alliance with Davidson too convenient. "Martha," he called his assistant, "I need you to find every record of Thomas Carter's death. And get me Judge Harrison. I need to see my father's private files." "What are you going to do?" Lily asked. Nicholas touched the rose pendant at her throat. "I'm going to find the truth. My father wasn't perfect, but he was a good man. There's more to this story. And if there isn't, if he really did..." Lily couldn't finish. "Then we'll face it together." He took her hands in his. "I love you, Lily. Nothing your mother or Davidson or anyone else says can change that." Lily leaned against him, tears falling on his shirt. Around them, the roses swayed in the breeze, their thorns hidden beneath beautiful petals, like the secrets threatening to tear their world apart. In his office, Victor Davidson watched security camera footage of the garden scene with satisfaction. Eleanor Carter had played her part perfectly. Now all he had to do was wait for Nicholas's world to crumble, but he hadn't counted on one thing. In the hospital's security office, Nancy the nurse was rewinding footage from 27 years ago. Back when she was a young ER nurse, the night Thomas Carter died, the night she saw something she was never supposed to see. And in 24 hours, the truth would change everything. The night shift at St. Mary's Hospital was always quieter, but tonight the silence felt heavy with secrets. Nancy sat in the security office, her hands shaking as she loaded the old VHS tape into the player. The screen flickered to life, showing grainy footage from October 15th, 1997. "Come on," she whispered, fast-forwarding through hours of hallway footage. "Show me, I'm not crazy." The door opened behind her. "You called me?" Nancy turned to find Judge Harrison in the doorway, looking tired but alert. Yes, there's something you need to see. Meanwhile, in Lily's hospital room, Nicholas sat by her bed, holding her hand as she slept fitfully. The DNA results and Eleanor's accusations lay scattered on the bedside table. His phone buzzed with another message from Victor Davidson. "Time's running out, Grayson. Pay the money or tomorrow's headlines will destroy you both." Caroline paced by the window. "We could pay her. 50 million is nothing compared to what we'd lose if this goes public." "It's not about the money." Nicholas watched Lily's face, troubled even in sleep. "It's about the truth. Dad wasn't a killer." "How can you be so sure?" "Because he taught me that love is more valuable than money." Nicholas touched the rose pendant at Lily's throat. "And you don't protect love by taking someone else's away." Lily stirred, opening her eyes. "Nicholas, what time is it?" "Just past midnight." He smiled, brushing her hair back. "You should rest. I keep dreaming about my father." Lily's voice was soft. "He used to tell me stories about working with your dad. He said Robert Grayson was the most honest man he'd ever met." Nicholas felt his heart clench. How could the same man his father supposedly murdered speak so highly of him? Suddenly, Martha burst into the room. "Sir, Judge Harrison needs you both in the security office now." "I'll get a wheelchair," Caroline said, but Lily was already trying to stand. "No, I need to walk." Her legs were shaky, but her eyes were determined. "I need to face this on my feet." The hospital corridors were dim and empty as they made their way to the security office. Nicholas supported Lily, feeling her tremble but never falter. Inside, they found Judge Harrison, Nancy, and Dr. Chen huddled around an old TV monitor. "What's going on?" Nicholas asked. Nancy turned to them, her face pale. 27 years ago, I was working the night shift when they brought Thomas Carter in. Everyone thought it was a heart attack, but I saw something I didn't understand. Until now." She pressed play on the ancient VCR. The grainy footage showed a hospital corridor. A man in a business suit, Thomas Carter, walked quickly, looking over his shoulder. Behind him, another figure appeared. "That's Victor Davidson." Caroline gasped. "He was so young." They watched as Davidson caught up to Carter, grabbing his arm. There was no audio, but the argument was clear. Carter pulled away, clutching his chest. As he collapsed, Davidson stood watching. He didn't call for help. He didn't move. He just watched. "Oh, my God," Lily whispered. But there was more. Minutes later, another man ran into frame. Robert Grayson, Nicholas's father. He frantically called for help, started CPR. The footage showed him riding in the ambulance with Carter, staying until the end. "I kept this tape," Nancy said quietly, "because something felt wrong. But by the time I thought to say something, the official cause was listed as a heart attack, and everyone had moved on." Judge Harrison cleared his throat. "There's more." He pulled out a yellowed envelope. "This was in your father's private safe, Nicholas. I was supposed to open it if questions ever arose about Thomas Carter's death." Nicholas took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a letter and a small key. "Dear Nicholas," he read aloud, "if you're reading this, someone has finally asked about Thomas Carter. He was my friend, my partner, and a good man. The night he died, he called me about corruption he'd discovered at Davidson Corp. Victor was running a scheme to steal from investors. Thomas had proof. He was on his way to meet me when—" Nicholas's voice broke. Lily gripped his hand. "I tried to save him," he continued reading. "But I was too late. The key enclosed opens a safe deposit box at First National Bank. Inside is everything Thomas found. I couldn't prove Victor was responsible for his death, but I made sure his daughter would be protected. The trust fund in Lily's name was my way of trying to make things right." Lily gasped. "Trust fund?" Judge Harrison nodded. "Your father set it up before he died. The money was placed in trust until you turned 30 or needed life-saving medical care. That's why Eleanor never had access to it." "And that's why she's working with Davidson now," Caroline said. "The new cancer drug means Lily qualifies for the trust. They're trying to discredit everything before she can claim it." Nicholas stared at the footage, at his father desperately trying to save his friend. "Martha, call the police and get me Davidson's number." "What are you going to do?" Lily asked. Nicholas pulled out his phone. I'm going to make a call that's 27 years overdue. But before he could dial, the security office door burst open. Eleanor Carter stood there, a gun pointed steadily at Nicholas's chest. "I'm afraid I can't let you do that," she said, coldly. Behind her, Victor Davidson stepped into view, smiling his shark smile. Well, it seems we have a family reunion to finish." The old VHS tape continued to play, silently showing the night everything changed. Outside, the roses in the garden swayed in the night breeze, their thorns sharp and ready. Sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. Sometimes old sins cast long shadows. And sometimes the greatest test of love isn't in grand gestures or sacrifices, but in standing together when the truth finally comes to light. As Eleanor's finger tightened on the trigger, Nicholas made a choice that would either save everything or cost him everything, including Lily's life. "Put the gun down, Eleanor." Nicholas's voice was steady, even with the weapon pointed at his chest. "It's over." Eleanor's laugh was bitter. "Over? It's been over for 27 years, ever since Thomas chose his precious morals over our future." "What are you talking about?" Lily stepped forward, but Nicholas held her back. "Your father was a fool," Victor said, moving beside Eleanor. "We offered him millions to keep quiet about the missing investor funds, but no, Thomas Carter had to be honest. So you killed him." Nicholas's eyes never left the gun. "I didn't kill anyone." Victor straightened his tie. "Thomas had a convenient heart attack. Natural causes. After you chased him down that hallway." Nancy pointed to the TV screen, still showing the damning footage. "After you watched him collapse and did nothing?" Eleanor's hand shook slightly. "Turn that off." "No." Lily's voice was stronger than anyone expected. "I want to see my father's last moments. I want to see the truth you've hidden from me my whole life." On the screen, Robert Grayson was still performing CPR, desperate to save his friend. Tears rolled down Lily's cheeks as she watched. "You see," Nicholas said softly, "my father tried to save yours. He wasn't the monster you claimed, Eleanor. He was trying to protect Lily." "Protect her?" Eleanor's laugh was hysterical now. "He set up that trust fund to buy his guilt away." "No. Judge." Harrison's voice cut through the tension. "He set it up because Thomas asked him to. I was there when they made the arrangement." Eleanor's hand wavered. "You're lying. It's in Thomas's will." The judge pulled out another document. "He knew someone was after him. He made provisions for Lily. And for you, Eleanor." "What?" "There was a letter." Judge Harrison's voice softened. "He forgave you for leaving. Said he understood you wanted a grander life than he could provide, but he hoped one day you'd remember what really mattered." Eleanor's composure cracked. The gun dipped slightly. "He forgave me." "Mom." Lily took a careful step forward. "Put the gun down, please." But Victor wasn't finished. He grabbed Eleanor's arm, raising the gun again. "Enough of this family drama. We're here for the money. All of it." "Actually," Martha's voice came from the doorway, "you're here for something else." Everyone turned. Martha stood with two police detectives, their weapons drawn. "Victor Davidson," one detective said, "we have a warrant for your arrest for the attempted murder of Thomas Carter, financial fraud and conspiracy." "You have no proof." "We have the video." Nicholas nodded to the screen. "We have my father's files, and now we have witnesses to your confession." Victor lunged for the gun in Eleanor's hand. In the chaos that followed, 2 shots rang out. Nicholas felt a burning pain in his shoulder as he fell, pushing Lily out of the way. Through blurring vision, he saw Eleanor tackle Victor, the gun skittering across the floor. "Nicholas!" Lily's face appeared above him, her honey-colored eyes filled with tears. "Stay with me, please stay with me." "Always," he whispered. Then everything went dark. The next thing Nicholas knew, he was lying in a hospital bed. Sunlight streamed through the window, and someone was reading Pride and Prejudice in a terrible British accent. "You're Elizabeth Bennet." "Needs work," he mumbled, opening his eyes. Lily sat beside him, the book in her lap. The rose pendant glinted at her throat. "You're one to talk," she smiled through tears. "How do you feel?" "Like I got shot saving the woman I love." He tried to sit up, wincing. "What happened?" "Victor and my mother are in custody." Lily helped him with the water glass. The police found everything in that safe deposit box. All the proof of Victor's crimes, both past and present. And Eleanor, she's cooperating with the investigation. Lily's voice softened. She asked to see me to explain. Apparently Victor had been blackmailing her for years. She really did love my father in her way. She was just lost. Nicholas touched her cheek. Like father, like daughter, seeing the good in people. Speaking of fathers, Lily picked up a photo from the bedside table. It showed Robert Grayson and Thomas Carter at a company picnic, both smiling, arms around each other's shoulders. Judge Harrison found this in the safe deposit box too. They were really friends, weren't they? Best friends. Caroline spoke from the doorway. She carried a large envelope. And speaking of the judge, he finished reviewing all the documents. The trust fund is officially yours, Lily, along with a seat on the Grayson Enterprises board. Your father's seat, which has been held in trust all these years. Lily stared at the papers. I don't know anything about business. You know about caring for people. Nicholas took her hand. That's what this company needs most. A nurse wheeled in a lunch tray, and Nicholas recognized the knowing smile. Nancy. Thank you for keeping that tape all these years. Some things are worth waiting for, Nancy winked, like love. Through the window they could see the rose garden in full bloom. The reading bench sat empty, waiting for them. So, Nicholas squeezed Lily's hand, what happens now? First you heal. She kissed him softly. Then, maybe we could start our own story, one without secrets or lies. I'd like that. Nicholas smiled. But can we keep the terrible British accents? Those are non-negotiable. Outside, camera crews were already gathering, eager for the story of corporate corruption, long-buried secrets, and love that transcended it all. But in that quiet hospital room, none of that mattered. What mattered was the truth, finally revealed after 27 years. What mattered was forgiveness, given freely, even when it seemed impossible. And what mattered most was love, the kind that doesn't count the cost, that stands strong in the face of bullets and lies, that sees the real person behind the facade. But even as Nicholas and Lily began to plan their future, one last secret remained untold, one that would test their love in ways they never imagined, because sometimes the greatest challenges come not from enemies, but from the very people we trust most. 6 months had passed since the night of gunshots and revelations. The rose garden at St. Mary's Hospital was in full autumn bloom, its benches filled with patients enjoying the warm October sunshine. Among them sat Lily, her health fully restored, reading to a group of children from the cancer ward. And they lived happily ever after, she finished, closing the book to applause from her small audience. Another one, a little girl called out. Tomorrow, Lily promised, touching the rose pendant that never left her throat. I have somewhere important to be today. That somewhere was the main courthouse downtown, where Victor Davidson's trial was reaching its end. Nicholas sat in the front row, his shoulder still occasionally aching from the gunshot wound, as the jury foreman stood to deliver the verdict. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder in the death of Thomas Carter, we find the defendant guilty. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Caroline squeezed her brother's hand. On the charges of financial fraud and attempted murder of Nicholas Grayson, we find the defendant guilty. Victor's face turned ashen as the bailiffs approached, but before they could lead him away, he turned to Nicholas with a cold smile. You think this is over? He sneered. Ask your sister about the real secret, about what she found in your father's study the night he died. Nicholas looked at Caroline, who had gone pale. What's he talking about? But before she could answer, Judge Harrison called for order. Victor was led away, still smiling his knowing smile. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed around Nicholas and Caroline. Questions flew about Victor's cryptic statement, about Eleanor Carter's reduced sentence for cooperation, about the future of Grayson Enterprises. No questions today. Martha expertly herded them away from the press. Mr. Grayson has another commitment. Indeed he did. At St. Mary's Hospital, the boardroom had been transformed. White flowers filled every corner, and sunlight streamed through the windows overlooking the rose garden. Are you sure about this? Caroline asked as they rode the elevator up. Getting married here? It's where we fell in love. Nicholas straightened his tie. Where we learned what really matters. But Caroline's face remained troubled. Nick, about what Victor said. Tell me. She took a deep breath. The night before Mom and Dad's plane crash, I overheard Dad arguing with someone in his study. When I checked later, his safe was open. There was a file missing, about an experimental drug trial that went wrong years ago. People died. The next day, the plane crash, Nicholas finished quietly. I never told anyone. But lately I've been wondering, what if it wasn't an accident? Before Nicholas could respond, the elevator doors opened. Judge Harrison stood waiting. It's time, he said. Then, seeing their faces, what's wrong? Caroline quickly explained what Victor had said, what she'd discovered. The judge's face grew grave. I was afraid this would come out eventually, he said. Follow me. He led them to a small office and unlocked a filing cabinet. Your father knew someone was trying to silence him about that drug trial. The night before the crash, he gave me this. He handed them a thick envelope. Inside were documents, photos, and a letter dated the day before the crash. Dear Nicholas and Caroline, Nicholas read aloud, his voice shaking. If you're reading this, something has happened to me and your mother. The truth about the failed drug trial must come out. But more importantly, you must know that everything we did for love. Love of each other, love of helping others, love of doing what's right. Caroline wiped tears from her eyes as Nicholas continued, reading. Victor Davidson tried to bury the truth about those deaths. He threatened our family. But running away or staying silent would teach you the wrong lesson about what matters most in life. By the time you read this, the evidence will have been delivered to the proper authorities. Davidson's crimes will be exposed, and you, my children, will understand that real wealth isn't in what we own, but in what we give, in who we love, in how we live. He knew, Caroline whispered. He knew the plane had been sabotaged, but he got on it anyway, to protect us, to do what was right. Like Thomas Carter did for Lily, Nicholas said softly. Just then, music began playing from the converted boardroom. The wedding was about to begin. Should we postpone? Caroline asked. With all this, no. Nicholas squared his shoulders. Dad was right. Love is what matters most. And I'm not waiting another minute to marry the woman who taught me that. The ceremony was simple, but beautiful. Lily wore a cream-colored dress and carried a bouquet of roses from the garden. Nancy and Dr. Chen sat in the front row, both wiping away tears. Even Eleanor, allowed to attend under guard, smiled genuinely as her daughter walked down the aisle. I thought I had everything before I met you, Nicholas said in his vows. But I had nothing. You taught me that real wealth is in the heart, in choosing love over fear, truth over comfort, right over easy. You showed me that miracles exist, Lily responded, touching her rose pendant, not just in medicine or money, but in the way love heals what's broken, in the way it makes us brave enough to face any truth, strong enough to forgive any wrong. Judge Harrison smiled as he pronounced them husband and wife. Two families, torn apart by old secrets, now united by love. I'd say that's worth more than all the money in the world. At the reception in the Rose Garden, Nancy pulled Nicholas aside. There's someone here to see you both. A small group of patients from the cancer ward had gathered, each holding a rose. The little girl from Lily's reading group stepped forward. We wanted to thank you, she said shyly, for the new medicine that's helping us get better, for the garden where we can read stories, for showing us that love is the best medicine of all. Lily knelt to hug her, careful of the IV pole. Nicholas watched, his heart full, knowing his father would be proud. Later, as they danced under the stars, Lily whispered, What do we do about Victor's last secret? About your parents? We honor their legacy, Nicholas said. We keep choosing love over fear. We keep helping others. We keep reading Jane Austen in terrible British accents. Lily laughed, then grew serious. I wish they could be here. All of them, your parents, my father, they are. Nicholas touched the rose pendant at her throat. In the way we love, in the choices we make, in every life we help save. Above them, the stars twinkled like diamonds. But the real treasure was here, in the garden their love had built, in the truth they'd fought to uncover, in the legacy they would carry forward. Because in the end, love is the greatest wealth of all. It can't be bought or sold. It can't be locked in a safe or hidden in a vault. It can only be given freely, cherished completely, and lived fully. And in that giving, that cherishing, that living, we find what it truly means to be rich. End.